As a relative newcomer to JMU, I am consistently impressed with the quality of our alumni and their impressive contributions out in the wider world. But perhaps less evident and obvious to some is the value and benefit of our alumni connections for our current students. Our graduates are going on to contribute widely in all aspects of the visual and performing arts, and in related and even unrelated fields. The breadth of these successes reinforces the value that training and participation in the arts provide students. The arts provide opportunities for collaboration, problem solving, and a deeper understanding of the human experience, among many other things. And for our current students, the success and work of our alumni are a roadmap and point of inspiration. It highlights what is possible and allows current students to keep dreaming and keep striving. I think it helps for students to see the light at the end of the tunnel, figuratively and literally, in the lives of our alumni. I am so excited for today's events as they allow us to all connect and be inspired from one another. I hope our students are inspired by the alumni, and I hope that our alumni are equally inspired by the wonderful work of our current students. Events like these can help further develop and strengthen the networks and relationships that we all rely upon for future successes. These relationships can be fleeting or lifelong, but they will always be a source of pride and inspiration, and I hope they will help leverage opportunities for all of us. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said, "We don't accomplish anything in this world alone, and whatever happens is a result of the whole tapestry of one's life and all the weaving of individual threads from one to another that create something." I hope that this is the beginning of another weaving, a beginning of a new relationship and connection that will foster growth and will support all of our creative dreaming about today and the future. I'm so excited that you're all here to join us, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the College of Visual and Performing Arts. I'm very pleased to now introduce Kate Berge from the Office of Career and Academic Planning. Kate?
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Berge. I work in Career and Academic Planning as an advisor and also serve as the liaison to the College of Visual and Performing Arts. As Ruben mentioned, after much planning and preparation, today is finally here, and it's really exciting to see our renowned alum come from all across the country for today. This program truly is a testament of our cross-campus collaboration with Career and Academic Planning, along with the Office of Alumni Relations and the College of Visual and Performing Arts. I'd like to take just a moment to acknowledge any special guests that we have here this afternoon. So if you're an administrator or faculty member within the College of Visual and Performing Arts, a staff member in student affairs or advancement, or on the JMU senior leadership team, please stand just for a moment so we can acknowledge you this afternoon. Our hope, as Ruben mentioned, is for all of us to leave inspired by the career journeys of our 8 successful young alumni from CVPA this afternoon. So the program this afternoon will run as following. We'll be able to hear from each alumni. We've split them into four panelists on each side, and so it will last about an hour. And we'll have 2 different groups. The first group of alumni will respond to a set of questions, and then we'll have a chance for students to ask a few questions, and then we'll swap. The second group of panelists will come forward, and we'll leave a few moments for student questions as well after that. We'll then have a networking reception again in the main lobby of the Forbes Center, and you'll have a chance to connect with our alumni during that time as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Sheena Ramirez. Sheena serves as the Director of Recruitment within the College of Visual and Performing Arts here at JMU. It's in this role that she's responsible for developing college-wide recruitment initiatives, data analysis, and visiting our high schools and college fairs. She previously served as the Campus Experience Manager at Stevens Institute of Technology. She's trained as a classical vocalist and was awarded Best Female Voice at the International Gilbert and Sullivan Festival in 2015. She sang leading roles in American premieres with New York City Opera Company, Amor Opera. She's currently finishing her work in her doctorate in voice performance, pedagogy, and literature here at JMU. Sheena is a graduate of Oberlin Conservatory and New England Conservatory. Please join me in welcoming Sheena Ramirez and our first four panelists to the stage.
Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces out here in the audience. I'm so glad that so many of our students were able to join us today. We've got a really fascinating conversation with 8 incredible alums. I've read a lot about them. I've been to their websites. These are some really, really cool people that I'm really glad that you all are getting a chance to interact with today. So what we'll do is I will let each of our panelists introduce themselves. If you could say your name, what year you graduated, what program you studied here at JMU, and what you're doing, then we can then begin with some of our questions to each individual person. Okie doke. All right, I think you've got the microphone right next to you. Just pass it down there.
Hi. So my name is Deanna Kennett. I graduated in 2006. I am a bass player, and I was in the School of Music, and I was a music industry major. Is that it? Okay.
And what you're doing now?
Oh, right now I'm the senior manager of education for a program called Ensemble Connect that's based at Carnegie Hall in New York City.
My name is Maura Gallagher, and I graduated from JMU in 2009. I studied art history here, and I currently work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art as a research associate in the American Wing, specializing in decorative arts.
Hi, I'm Lena Lee. I was class of 2015, and I was a theater and dance major. What else was there?
What do you do now?
Oh, what do I do now? I'm an actor in New York.
Hello, my name is Josh Smead. I graduated from JMU in 2012 with an art history degree. I currently am I'm an architect out in Hawaii. I just opened a new branch of my firm. Crawford Architects is the name of our firm. You should definitely look us up, and definitely want to connect with anybody that's interested in that.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down the line, so if the microphone can make its way back, I'll go ahead and start with Deanna, and what I'll do is I'll ask each panelist one question, and then we'll do one more round. Okie doke. So, Deanna, at Carnegie Hall, you work specifically with the Ensemble Connect program. What have you learned by facilitating programs for musicians at that highest level, and what role do you think classical music has as a vehicle for change in our communities?
Okay, so Ensemble Connect is a 2-year fellowship program for postgraduate musicians based at Carnegie Hall. They come to our program out of grad school. It's a part-time job for them. They get a stipend and health insurance. And while they're in the program, they're performing in chamber music concert series at Carnegie, at Juilliard, and other places in the city. We do a residency at Skidmore College in upstate New York twice each year. And they're each partnered with a New York City public school, and they're working alongside an instrumental music teacher 25 times each year. They also learn to put together what we call interactive performances that are sort of an exploration of a musical piece or theme in conversation with their audiences, and those tour to schools and then also get adapted for working in community venues. So we work with a lot of incarcerated populations, special needs populations, homeless shelters, and to support all of the work that we ask them to do as part of the program, but also to give them space to think about what a personally meaningful career in music can look like. We offer weekly professional development workshops. So that's just a little bit of background about sort of what my experiences have been, or who I'm working with, as I should say. I've learned a lot in the past 11 years, but I think most importantly, I've learned how important it is for artists to get comfortable being outside of their comfort zones and to always be looking for what it is that sparks joy in them, and helping to use that information to propel them forward. I think that it's been so inspiring to me to see the careers that alumni of our program have gone on to do, and that see how the experience that they've had propel them into careers that I don't think they ever would have imagined otherwise. For instance, we have an alum who's a violist who actually his quartet just won a Grammy, and he as part of the program, performed at Rikers Island, which is a system of jails in New York City, and that experience sort of inspired him to start an organization called Musicambia that's offering music lessons for incarcerated populations. It's now countrywide. So I think it's been really inspiring to see. And the second half of your question, I think that classical music, in terms of how it can impact communities, I think classical music is just like any other art form in that the arts have such an inherent power to connect, to bridge differences, to inspire. And if classical music is sort of the vehicle for that, I think that when an artist knows, sort of finds their joy and finds their true authentic voice, I think that it can be such a powerful change. Something I think that's a little bit specific that we're really working on is how can classical music best reflect the diversity of our communities, and I think that's an issue that classical music is really needs to run with.
Absolutely. All right. Maura, as a research associate for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, you have had a chance to work on many exhibitions and publications. How did you find your niche in American history, and what role do you think the decorative arts play in that story?
So coming to study American history actually started right here at JMU. I sort of came in with an interest in history. I actually thought I was going to be a high school history teacher. And it was a fantastic art history survey class I had to take as a gen ed that launched me into the pursuit of art history. And I was just really fortunate that my time here coincided with a number of course offerings that happened to focus on American art themes. Both John Ott taught a wonderful class on Monticello while I was here. There was a course on Gothic Revival architecture. And all of those things just sort of helped to direct my interest. Living in America makes it a lot easier to find a job in American history than pursuing some other disciplines. And so that certainly helped to influence that. And at the Met, most of my work focuses on artistic movements from the latter half of the 19th century here in America. And that has largely come about because of the mentorship I've received from the different curators within the museum, and just the different projects that have come up in my time there as well that have really allowed me to hone in. And in terms of the role that the decorative arts play in all of that, to me, they are sort of, well, they're not sort of, they are the material legacy of the past. They are the physical objects that remain from these past moments in time, and are the tools that we can use to tell these very rich and sometimes often untold stories from the past. And I love using them as a point of entry to discuss different narratives, whether it's the story of the maker, the story of the person who commissioned it or owned it, or the person who was responsible for its use, cleaning, and maintenance. All of those things sort of tell us something different about our past and our culture. And it's just been a really fun experience to get to explore how that can be brought into public audiences, because I think paintings and sculpture can sometimes seem kind of so remote or so distant for so many people, but everyone is sitting in a chair right now, and I can tell you a little bit about that history and why you're sitting in a chair that looks like that, and all of these things say something about our environment, and it's been really fun to get to explore that with the public and other academics.
Fabulous. Lena, how did you make your first break into musical theater?
My very first professional contract was the summer of my junior year, and it was at Flat Rock Playhouse. And it was probably one of the best summers of my life. Flat Rock really pushed us and challenged us and made us grow as artists very quickly in one summer. And they gave us the tools to really kind of, I guess, yeah, to keep challenging yourself and keep training and keep pushing yourself. And I kind of, yeah, I think a lot of my career kind of has to do with what I learned from Flat Rock and at JMU. Yeah, so I think that was my first big break. And then, after that, I kind of took what I learned from there and traveled all across the country doing other shows and, keep on training.
Absolutely. All right, Josh. Your undergraduate arts experience blended art history, studio art, interior architecture. How do you feel that this well-rounded arts experience prepared you for a master's in architecture and your current line of work?
Good question. It definitely gives you, I think, a little bit different perspective to have a little bit more of a varied background, specifically for architecture, rather than a lot of students tend to, if you'll do your bachelor's of architecture, then you'll go on and get your master's. A lot of the programs I talked to when I was looking to get into master's programs really encouraged having a diverse background and kind of having a little bit of a broader experience. They very much welcomed it. So in my case, I was fortunate that having specifically like with art history, a little bit more, I think, of an understanding of what has come before us. Specifically with architecture, we tend to focus on modernism and the 20th century, but there's a lot more history than that. Being at JMU and going through the studio classes and learning more about creative arts, having the history classes and learning, more about, like I said, what came before, not just in 100 years, but what came 1,000 years before. And then kind of folding some of those things into what I do now is, I think, really the foundation of what I've tried to do with my design career.
Great. All right, we'll come back down here, Deanna. So, Deanna, what would you say is the best piece of advice that you've gotten in your career?
Sure. So when I was in school here, I was going to be a bass player. That was the path that I saw myself on. I imagined myself being in an orchestra someday, and that is just sort of what I wanted to do. And as part of the music industry program, I interned at the Baltimore Symphony's education department. And I'm so embarrassed to say that that was the first time that it ever occurred to me that there were people who worked behind the scenes in these huge cultural institutions. And I just was so curious about that. I was so curious about the people that were there behind the curtain. And I had this real crisis of conscience around the end of my senior year, where I was planning to go do a master's in music performance, and I just wasn't sure that that was what I wanted to do. It occurred to me that I didn't really like to practice that much. And, I thought, and I reflected on a lot of the experiences that I had had in school, and I realized that most of my most meaningful experiences were when I was helping to bring people together through music. But I was having a really hard time giving up on the dream of being a bass player. And I felt like I was going to be letting all of these people down. I was going to be letting my parents down. I was going to be letting myself down. I was going to be letting my professors down. And I was in Dr. McCashin's office one day, and towards the end of my senior year, I think it was almost graduation weekend. And he said to me, and I don't think you had any idea that you were going to open me up to this, but he said, Deanna, there are so many ways to make an impact on the field of music that don't involve playing your instrument. And in that moment, I felt so free and also empowered to say that, I can make a change in the field, and that's what I'm going to do. Amazing.
Yeah, there's so many avenues to be able to help in music, for sure. All right, Maura, what have you found to be the most valuable career skills you've learned outside of the arts?
Well, I was thinking about this question, and there are so many things that you could say in terms of soft skills, interviewing, but I have to say the best skill I guess I've acquired is to always be curious and to ask for help. No one has gotten that wonderful quote that we heard at the beginning of the program. No one gets to where they are alone or by themselves, that there's always a greater sort of path, and your professors, your supervisors, all of these people have deep knowledge of something that you don't know, and asking them to walk you through it, to explain it, is always going to be your greatest asset. And I think one of the most humbling things I've experienced is realizing how much I don't know, and using that tool to ask for help and assistance and guidance is one of the best things that has helped me in my career.
It's great to hear, especially for all the students in the room. Lena, you recently performed in the Broadway production of Miss Saigon. What were the biggest differences between regional theater and performing on Broadway?
Honestly, there really isn't a big difference. Performing on Broadway and doing regional theater, it's the same process. You have rehearsal, you have tech, you have previews, and then you open. But the timeline is a little different. For bigger Broadway shows, you could have up to like a month of tech instead of 2 days. And previews, I think our previews were like a month long. It's a very, very lengthy process. And the run is much longer, hopefully. But the biggest difference is that in regional theater, you're kind of together as a group, and you kind of spend all of your time with that same group. And theater, whatever show you're doing, that's like your life. While when you work in New York, it's kind of like a 9-to-5 job, except it's 7 to midnight. But yeah, you do the show, and then you get to go home and kind of have a life of your own instead of theater being everything, and you're like constantly surrounded by theater people, which is great, But yeah, you get to have your own life. You get to go home to your own apartment, and kind of pursue other passions that you have. Yeah, but it's basically theater. It's pretty much the same.
Josh, how do you think your connection to the arts has impacted your worldview?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So yeah, I mean, being involved with the arts definitely, I think, makes you look at the world more holistically. There's, everything is becoming globalized. Everything is very interconnected. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on one of my studios I actually took while I was a student here was we were doing a project. We were designing a house for Iraq, and it was a really this is about probably on towards 10 years ago or something like that. So we were still in the heart of it with that whole conflict, but it really makes you think of arts and architecture as a means of bringing people together. It really is a continuity. We have a lot of events that happen in the world, but at the end of the day, those items are typically continuous, and the design process really does operate in some ways outside of them, but at the same time reacts to them. So I think in terms of how it's impacted me, it really does, like I said, the studio that emphasized Iraq, it really does make you think, there are other parts of the world that we need to be paying attention to as we're designing, and using these outside influences, and not just living within our little bubble. I think that's one of the big issues that really the world overall is having, is that we tend to be fixated and focused on one small part of it, our little corner. But our little corner may impact, especially with architecture, a lot of people's little corner. So, I think really opening up, my worldview is something that happened at JMU, and something that really does impact everything that I do as I'm working on really any design.
Great. All right, I'm going to ask the panelists one more short question each, but then you all are going to have a chance to ask them some questions as well. So we have a microphone, I believe, right there in the back. So if you are interested in asking a question to our panelists, you can come to the back, but I'm going to ask each of them one short question before we get started with our questions for the audience. So, Deanna, what other kinds of jobs have you had, either in the arts or in other fields?
Yes, well, when I was at JMU, I worked at Target. But right out of school, I worked for a summer for the Heifetz International Music Festival, which at the time was in New Hampshire. And from there, I worked at New England Conservatory, helped managing their large ensemble program for their prep school. And then I had a brief stint right before the economy tanked and I lost my job with the American Symphony Orchestra. But I've been with Carnegie Hall for 11 years now.
Maura, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years or in 10 years?
So I really don't like that question. only because 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I never thought I would be where I am now. Life takes you on crazy paths all the time, and I could have never envisioned or dreamed that I would have gone from sitting in a classroom at Duke Hall to working at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I remember somebody even asking me that one day, and I was like, oh man, I would never get there, you know. And it happened. I mean, I worked hard, and it just worked out that way. But hopefully in 5 to 10 years, I'll still be getting to research incredible objects, hopefully at an incredible institution, maybe even still at the Met, but somewhere where I get to tell stories about the past to people in the present. So,
Great. Lena, what are some of the things that you wish you had done while you were in college?
Specifically within the major, I wish I
Maybe not.
I wish I had utilized everything that we're given in this school. We have such a beautiful facility. I wish I would have used the practice rooms and the dance studios and the classroom more to kind of hone your art. Utilize your professors. They're there to help you. Utilize each other. I think I wish I would have done more of that. Just grab a friend, go into a practice room, get feedback, do scene work. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And Josh, what advice do you have for students who might want to go into your field?
Well, talk to me because I'm here. Yeah, I mean, you know, I didn't know really any architects before I got into the field. At the time when I was a JMU student, there was not the architectural focus of the program, so definitely take advantage of that. You know, I think that overall, just if you're going to go into a field, I mean, really any design field, architecture, of course, being the one I would know the most about, would just be, I think it was referenced earlier, maintain your curiosity. I mean, you really need to be constantly investigating, constantly willing to seek whatever the answers are, even if you're doing something incredibly boring, like, you know, maybe you're working on some, you know, bathroom details in a big construction drawing package. Sounds extremely boring, but at the same time, you learn how the process works, you know, understanding every facet of it. It's a very complex discipline, so no item is too small for you to learn more about. So maintain that curiosity and really just push yourself to continuously learn.
Fantastic. All right, so now we are at the time in our program where we have a few minutes for our student questions, or faculty or anyone else who is here in the room who would like to ask questions of our panelists. Don't be shy. We have a microphone in the back. If you want to raise your hand, they can come to you.
Hi, is it on? Okay, cool. I have a question for Deanna. You talked about being a music industry student here, even though you said you really wanted to be a performer. What made you choose that concentration?
My dad. It's totally the truth. He was like, what are you going to do as a bass player? And he enjoyed the idea of it being business oriented. So that was what made me choose it. But I am very happy that I did. Yeah.
Practical. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question for Lena. I know that you majored here as theater and dance, but then you ended up pursuing musical theater. How, when you went out to audition for summer theaters, did you intend to do musical theater, or did it just end up that way?
Well, I actually didn't know that I wanted to seriously pursue musical theater until my junior year, I believe. So once I decided going out to auditions, I just kind of jumped in and did musical theater stuff. Right on. Yeah.
I have a question about, how do you all do you stay in contact with your family a lot? Because I know it's kind of hard when sometimes you go into music or some type of art form, you kind of lose touch just a little bit. I think I see a ring on his finger. I don't have my glasses on, but I can see a little bit. I ain't got my glasses on, but I can see a little bit.
Yeah, it's shiny. Yeah, that's a good question. So it's definitely, it can be challenging at times. So I'm actually incredibly fortunate. My wife is also an architect, so I get to see her at work every day. And I am very much aware that for the vast majority of people, working every day with their significant other is probably not an option. So I'm fortunate that I don't have that. So I get to see my wife. It definitely can cause issues with, I have 2 small children, so there's times when I miss them in the evenings if we're having to work quite a bit. And also, I'm in Honolulu, so that's 5 hours off of the East Coast where my family is, so even that can contribute to it. You never know where it might take you. So, you have to be diligent with it and try and set priorities. I would definitely say that professors might potentially disagree, but to a certain extent, you have to have that balance of, you need to have your time to rest. You need to have your time to connect with your family. You really need to be able to focus on those things, because at the end of the day, you can become married to your profession. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are looking to maintain those other relationships, you got to put that effort in too. So at least what I try and do. Does anybody else want to?
All right, we've got a question up here in the front.
My question's for Deanna. You briefly mentioned the issue with classical music, and especially with engaging audiences who might not typically be interested in that, because we live in 2020 and it's not.
You mean like classical music not being relevant, or?
Not being relevant, and like getting audiences engaged who might not typically be engaged, and how you use it in an educational way.
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. So I think that, in my experience, the burden of making classical music relevant should be on the artist. And I think that it is so important for musicians to be able to connect the music that they're playing, that they love so much, to the normal human element. I find so often the musicians that are coming into Ensemble Connect have a very no awareness that there is an entire world that exists outside of the classical music bubble. And I think when they can really dig within themselves and find that human experience and connect that to their audiences, it is so powerful, both for their audience but also for themselves. Yes. I'm sorry, say it again?
A real life application of how you would do that.
Can you give me like a scenario? You talked about you worked with incarcerated people. Yeah, oh yeah. Okay. So in that specifically, we ask our fellows to put together interactive performances, and they choose sort of an entry point. If anyone that was in the conducting class earlier today, we had a little bit of an exercise in how to find an entry point into a piece of music, but your entry point can be anything. And I've seen so many incredible programs that our fellows have put together be so successful because they're connecting to like an emotional experience, or and let's go with that. So I would say find like something that is just human and relevant, and build a program around that. And anybody, it's relevant for everybody and inspiring for everybody.
Fantastic. All right, last question for our panelists. We have one last question right over here on the far end. But don't worry, if you have more questions, we have 4 more incredibly talented people coming up in a minute as well.
My question is for Lena. So in an industry that seems to be constantly moving way too fast and is completely out of your hands and is mentally and emotionally taxing, how do you make sure you're taking care of yourself mentally? How are you making sure you're taking time for yourself while also staying on top of your craft?
That's a really great question. Was it Kate? I don't remember. Gave me really good advice, saying that theater can't be your life. You need to have a life outside of theater, and that's for, your own sanity. You can get burnt out really quickly in theater, and so you have to make time for yourself, and you have to, like, for example, whenever I go into an audition and it doesn't feel great, I always treat myself to something afterwards. Things like that, little things like that, you just have to find things that'll make you feel better, things that'll creatively fulfill you outside of having a job. Therapy is great, if you're into that kind of thing. And just having people around you, having a community to support you, and people that understand what you're going through. Yeah.
Amazing. Can we all give a hand to our round of panelists? All right. Thank you all. So we're just going to take a second here. If you need to stand up and stretch, don't leave the room, but stay here in the room. If you need to move your arms a little bit, we're going to move from our first panel to our second panel.
You accidentally created your own order.
All right, we're about ready. Everyone rolled their shoulders, rolled them the other way, feeling loose, relaxed. All right, round 2. We are going to be talking with 4 more incredible young alumni here, and it will be the same format. I'll be asking each of them a few questions, and then we will open it up to you here in the audience to ask any questions you might have of our panelists. So let's go ahead and get started. So Sarah. What? Oh, yes, of course. I forgot the first part. What we're going to do is we're going to take a moment to have each person introduce themselves. You're going to say your name, what year you graduated, what program you graduated from, and what you're doing now. Okay, thank you.
My name is Sarah Goslin. I graduated in 2008, and I was a dance major. Now I'm a physical therapist who specializes in dance medicine, and I work with all the JMU dancers here, and I teach, and I also help run a local nonprofit dance organization.
My name is Shannon Kingett. I graduated in 2010. I was in the School of Music. I was a voice major with a concentration in music theater. And now I am the director of content and special projects, which is a fancy way of saying I do all of the marketing for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway, as well as in San Francisco and in Toronto.
Hi guys, I'm Evan Duffy. Graduated in 2012. Gave my recital in 2013 though. That's a predicament you guys can ask me about later. I did a double major in piano performance and music composition. I'm now a film composer. I work on a couple TV shows, Magnum P.I., MacGyver. I work with the composer Brian Tyler, working on the new Fast and Furious movie right now, and some other stuff, so yeah.
I'm Danny O'Brien. I hail from Baltimore. When I was at JMU, I got my BFA in studio art and sculpture. I also studied art education and got my licensure and did an art history minor. Currently, I'm a practicing professional artist. I make sculpture and mixed media work. I just got word today that actually I'll be showing in Spring Break Art Fair. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's kind of like the curator fair in New York City. So that's kind of what I got coming up, and I'm also a resident artist at Baltimore Clayworks right now.
Fabulous. Okay, now we'll really start the questions. Thank you. Sarah, dance and pre-physical therapy is a popular double program here at JMU. After completing your doctorate, you came back to Harrisonburg to serve this community. What would you say are the biggest differences you find between working in the two disciplines and studying the two disciplines?
Well, I'd say it's a big difference. Studying, I just wanted to get through school. It was really hard to see any connection. I mean, especially when I was here at JMU, I was a dance major, and it's because I just wanted to dance, and I love dance so much. I'm like, I knew I wanted to be a PT, but I'm like, I don't want to be a bio major. I don't want to kinesiology, all that other stuff. So it was doing it, but thinking of it being as so separate. So it was always like, I don't know how many times I got asked in my time, why is a dance major in biology? What are you doing here? So it was really hard just getting through. And then grad school was the same. It was just, I just wanted to get through school and remember, count down till I could sleep again. So then once you get out of that and really start practicing and doing everything that you're doing, it all kind of comes together. And for me, I was really lucky in that I could meld my two passions. So part of it, when I think about my dance background and now being a PT, is dancers and a lot of performance arts have this wonderful awareness of their body and movement and teaching movement and how to move. And that's what I do as a PT every day. I take people, I look at how they move, what they're doing, fix them. And then I come from the other direction, is I have this whole dance background. I know exactly what my patients are going through. So anytime I see dancers, when I come here, I do injury screens. One, I went through the program, so it helped. I already have a relationship, but even I work with all the local studios. So I have, a unique perspective on, I know what you're going through, You can come to me and say, I pulled something when I did this soda shot, and I'm gonna know what you meant. And I also am gonna understand what you have to get back to, and how a lot of times it can't be, well, it hurts, you need to just rest, take some ibuprofen. And that is not always an option, especially if it's your major or anything else you're getting graded on. So it's just being able to establish that trust and having understanding of, a unique perspective. You have this very specialized athletes, I believe dancers, artists are definitely athletes. We just do everything and make it look better than what everybody else does. And having somebody speak up for them is huge.
Wow, great. Okay. Let's see. Shannon, you have been a part of so many influential Broadway shows like Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, The Book of Mormon, and Chicago. What challenges do you find in marketing these shows, and how do you view your role in the musicals process?
It totally depends on the show. Right now I work on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. If you don't know about it, it is the 8th story, the conclusion of the Harry Potter series. Harry Potter's an adult now. You would think that a show like that would be an easy sell, who doesn't love Harry Potter, but it is a 2-part play, so you have to convince people to spend almost 6 hours watching it. You have to convince them to buy 2 tickets, so there's certainly challenges there, even for something that sounds like a sure thing. Whereas, a show like Chicago has been running on Broadway for over 20 years, so what kinds of audiences are you going after? It's a completely different kind of people that you're trying to reach. So you have to employ completely different techniques in terms of finding them. Chicago is an international show at this point. So how are you reaching international tourists versus Harry Potter, which has been open for not even 2 years? There's plenty of locals who still need to see it. So there's different ways of going after both of those audiences. So it's never the same from show to show. It's really going to depend on what the content is and the kind of audience member that's going to want to see it. In terms of how marketing relates to the artistic process of the show, it's funny, I don't think that the marketing should ever inform the artistic process. I think art needs to exist not to be sold, but to be art. But then the art has to inform the marketing, because you can't have something continue if no one knows it exists. So marketing is so key. It's actually an industry I didn't know existed in the arts, or I guess if I had thought about it, sure, I would have known, but I didn't realize that there's so many professionals like me. I mean, I used to work for an agency with over 100 employees who only worked in advertising for Broadway. And it's such a key factor. You need to sell tickets if you want to keep running your show. And so it's actually much more integral to the process than I thought. You know, we would sit in meetings with multi-Tony Award-winning producers week after week after week, and at first that was really kind of overwhelming, but you are in fact some of the most important people to the producers, because you are the people who are selling their tickets and making them money.
Sort of empathize with that as recruitment. All right, great. Evan, you've written scores for many major motion pictures, including Charlie's Angels, Crazy Rich Asians, The Avengers: Age of Ultron. Plus, your personal YouTube channel has over 150,000 subscribers.
That's
Yes.
vintage.
That's a vintage one, even, y'all. Okay. So how much of your early success, see, I recognize that, do you credit to networking and putting your music out into the world? And what technologies aided in your journey that you think our students should learn more about?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, YouTube was incredibly helpful. It's something that I think a lot of musicians, especially in classical music, overlook. Because it's just, there's so many vloggers and all that type of stuff on there, or whatever you call them. You guys know who I'm talking about. The Logan Pauls, we're aware. And so you don't necessarily think of it as a tool to get your music out. But one of the best things I ever did was I had a friend in college, we had the same dorm, and he just bugged me so much to put these little EDM covers on YouTube. And I finally caved and did it, and that's how the YouTube channel got started. The YouTube channel got me my manager. My manager got me an assistant gig cleaning like toilets and everything, like at the composer Brian Tyler, who I work with at his place, and I just tried to work hard underneath him and come up through that. So YouTube connected me to the people that I really needed to hear my music that might not be in Virginia, they might not be in Los Angeles, they might not be in New York, they could be in Montana or somewhere, and all you need is the right person to hear it. And YouTube's a global platform like that, so it really is helpful. And to piggyback kind of off that question, I would say one of the biggest questions I get asked is, how do you know like when to finish a piece of music? Like, when is a piece of music done? I know composers in here can relate to that question, and the answer is it's never is. But YouTube, or a similar platform, kind of forces you to go, no, it is done, and put it out, and you don't get paralyzed with that fear of like, well, is it done? You just click upload and like, you know, I don't know, lock your computer for a day so you can't like undo it or something. And it gets it out there, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you'll learn more every time you do it. And my first things I ever uploaded were awful. I mean, embarrassing, but I leave them up there because it's, you know, part of the journey, stuff like that. And technologies, I would say, if you're trying to write music for film or anything, or even produce music as like an artist, you definitely need to learn a DAW, like a digital audio workstation, a DAW. So Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic Pro, every single professional that works in recorded music uses those every single day. So you can't go wrong with any of those.
Great. Yeah. Good info even for people outside of music industry. All right, Danny, what skills have you learned to balance your professional, artistic, and personal goals?
Well, thankfully, a lot of those goals are one and the same, because I'm a professional artist and my personal goals are often aligned with my professional artistic goals. But some of the things I've learned that are really valuable to my career are time management and setting goals for myself. So right out of JMU, I taught middle school in Northern Virginia for 3 years. And it was really challenging to carve out studio time for myself and my practice. So the way I handled that was every winter I would apply to a lot of residencies and a lot of programs over the summer. And then that way with my 2 months off at the summer, I would just go somewhere else, go to a new country or a new state and just plant myself there and studio it out. And that really helped me balance my goals, and it helped keep all of the sort of things I was interested in check. And sort of piggybacking off of what Evan just said, technology has been a really great resource for me in my career. Instagram is like the #1 tool for visual artists these days. I just got this offer to show in a gallery in LA like 2 weeks ago because someone found my Instagram and asked for a PDF of work available, and he's gonna come to Baltimore, give me a studio visit, and I'm gonna have a solo show in LA. So it's like Instagram is amazing for that. So kind of another skill I've learned is how to market yourself. It's something that I don't know how much I really learned at JMU, but sort of on the fly, I've been teaching myself, like, how do I take photos of things in interesting ways? How do I talk about my work in concise ways and just put it all out there? So, yeah.
Great. All right, we'll come back here to the beginning. So, Sarah, what advice would you offer college art students today as they prepare to launch into their own careers?
Yeah. This one, loaded question. So I think we've hit on this a little bit. I think one of my big things too is sometimes as artists, we tend to be very passionate about what we do and want to put ourselves out there, and sometimes have to over and over and over again. And you say, yes, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. But you also really have to find that balance of how much of yourself you can give and still be yourself and take time for yourself. And it's really hard. I'm still figuring out, but thing to do and to learn how to say no. And I think along of that part of it is that as artists too, don't be afraid to put value to what you do. A lot of times we forget, we get asked, I help run, like I said, a local nonprofit thing. We get asked by all these other communities, and this, and this, and this. And it's like, oh yeah, great. Let's put our name out there. Let's do this. Let's do this. And it's like, wait, what we're doing to help with this is also important. And I want you guys to see that it's important. So can you pay us? Which is also always nice, and things like that is sometimes you'll get asked these things, but it's, what you do is valuable, and don't be afraid to put value to it, which will then also help you from reaching the burnout part, which can definitely happen, if other people are seeing you as meaningful, and then it helps you feel more meaningful as well.
Great, really important. All right, Shannon, what setbacks have you had in your career, and how have you learned from them?
I think any professional setback I've had is because I'm running a little too fast. I'm an ambitious person by nature, and I have jumped into things that I was not ready for. And it was humbling to learn that. There just have been times where I have not performed to the level that I meant to, and it's because I took things on that I should not have taken on. I think the thing I have realized 10 years out of school is that life and your career is long. You do not need to accomplish everything on your professional checklist in 5 years. In fact, you won't. I think, when I was 22, I felt paralyzed because there were so many things I wanted to do, and I didn't know how I was going to get to do all of them. And you don't have to do everything at once. You can take it slow, and it's okay if you're not getting promoted every 6 months. In fact, that's crazy. And so I would say that for me, that's something I wish I had known at 22, that just give yourself a break. You'll get there when you get there. In fact, this is such a cheesy thing, but it really is about the journey. Every time I've landed at a destination, I've been like, okay, now what? You have this moment where you're like, but I've been waiting to get here, and now I'm here, and it doesn't feel as amazing as I thought it would. And I wish that I had treasured the journey there, because because that's where the joy comes from. So I would say that all of my setbacks have come from overlooking that and just going 100 miles an hour. And I'm starting to take it slower. And that, you know, a lot of people have mentioned burnout. It's a thing with millennial culture. I know you guys are probably Gen Z, but like, it's true. Like, we hustle, and you have to have a balance. It's, at the end of the day, it's just a job. Like, it, you know, in the visual performing arts, I think we're all really passionate about what we choose to do for work, but it still is work. And it's just, you know, at the end of the day, it's to pay your bills. So you have to have a personal life outside of it, or again, you're gonna go too fast and you're gonna burn out too quick.
Really, really important. And it's great to hear, you know, so many of our panelists today touch on that, because I think that that's something our students worry about and think about. All right, Evan, what has been the most unexpected aspect of your career so far?
Truly unexpected. I was officially Dr. Dre's piano teacher for 3 months. That's a story I can tell you about. But in terms of like actually relevant to what I'm doing, yeah, I didn't think that was going to be my path. Never had a lesson, by the way, don't. So I guess the best, it kind of is an anecdote for to always give your best no matter how small the project is too, is I did this podcast for a friend of a friend like 5 years ago. And it was really short. It was just a little horror story she and her husband had written, and they needed music for the intro, music for the outro, and a couple of things to loop underneath. And it was no money, and I do agree with everybody can always pay you something, even if it's $10, whatever. But I was doing it as a favor for a friend, not like a career opportunity. And so I just did I tried hard. I was proud of what I did, and I did it in like a day and a half, sent it off to her. They said, thank you. They went on their way. I went on my way. And that was it for about 3-4 years. And then I got an email about a year ago, and it was from this girl who her husband had done this thing. And she said, hey, I hope you're well. I'm working for this company called The Works Entertainment. They were just bought by Cirque du Soleil. And she said, I really need a composer for this show that we're putting together. It's Lionsgate's Now You See Me Live, with Mark Ruffalo and all that. So they were doing a live adaptation of that. And they said, we need a composer. Would you want to be involved in that? And so I pitched for it, and I got the show, and I scored the show. And then they liked the score of that show. And so they just had me do the score for The Illusionist, which was on Broadway this holiday season, which was really cool. My first Broadway thing. And so that was just so unexpected, because it all came from a podcast that I could have just thrown away and said, they're not paying me, whatever. So do your best always, because you don't know who, I was talking with the professor earlier too, he said you don't know who you're talking to sometimes. The person you're talking to, and not that you should treat people like this, but they could be the person who gives you your next job. And even if it doesn't seem like it, this one came out of complete left field, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. So yeah, that's my advice on that as well.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. Okay, Danny. One of your latest installations, Tongue Puddles, uses both hard and soft objects suggestive of jewelry, flora, playground equipment, and road signs. What inspired your use of these different mediums, and how does the art represent your views on feminism?
Okay, so this is a bit complex. I'm pretty anti-capitalistic in nature and in my studio practice, so I try to use things from around the house and things that I find or borrow or find in trash cans as bases for my structures and for my sculptures. So a lot of my material is derived from that sort of like resourcefulness and not wanting to contribute to capitalism. So the structures are therefore those, combined with, I make hand-tied latch hook rugs. And this is sort of my biggest, maybe and most literal nod to feminism, is it's a very traditionally domesticated and feminized way of making rugs. Latch hooking was super popular in the 70s and 80s, especially, and it was kind of catered towards women to work on in the home place, to like build these little sort of paintings. Like you may have seen them, they're pieces of mesh and they have an image printed on them, and then you take pieces of colored yarn and you match it with the color that's printed on the mesh, and then you like formulate this sort of paint by numbers rug. And so a lot of times those become pillowcases or toilet seat covers or little wall hangings. So I'm sort of like proudly reusing that methodology to make large scale sculptures and paintings with that same technique. And so that's really my nod to feminism, but also as a feminist and as a feminist artist, I think all of my work reflects my identity in that way.
Wow, great. All right, we're going to ask the panel one last quick question, and then we're going to open it up for your questions. So each person, one last quick question. So Sarah, who have been some of the role models in your fields?
I'd say more now with my combining everything. So Marika Molnar, who's in New York City, she was the first ever official dance PT. George Balanchine actually asked her officially to be the PT for the New York City Ballet, and that's kind of where I've done a lot of my training, was through her and Dance Medicine Practicum, and she's just an amazing pioneer in the field. I also really look up to Irene Dowd, who teaches at Juilliard. She teaches the anatomy classes and everything, and she just has this beautiful way of melding art and science and bringing it all together in this fantastic way to just teach it and go about that.
Shannon, what kind of work does it really take to be an artistic professional?
I've been talking about this all day. You have to be fearless. I think it takes a lot of vulnerability to achieve in this field. That's what the field requires of you, and that requires you to be fearless. I think the reason I've been able to achieve at a high level is because I've done some ballsy things. The way I broke into the Broadway industry, I didn't have any prior experience. I didn't have any network in the industry, so I applied for a job I was not qualified for, but I submitted a music video cover letter, and that sort of led to the rest of my career unfolding. And it was because I was shameless, and they were like, "Who is this person? We have to meet her." And and I'm not saying that's what you need to do, but I think you have to be unafraid to take risks, because you have to take risks in any profession, and especially in the visual and performing arts, which is a very competitive field. You're not going to have the opportunities unless you're willing to put yourself out there.
Evan, how have you grown as an artist and professional since leaving college?
As an artist, I would say, kind of piggybacking off of what you said earlier about architecture, there's no detail too small. I think that's a really great thing that all musicians, composers, everybody can bring into things, because if you're a composer, you're probably working with digital audio at some capacity, and that's great if you just use Finale and put it through and it's called a day. But you need to consider the mix. If your mixing skills aren't that great, how can this feel more impactful? The production really does contribute to the way your art's received. So I would say focusing on the production and the way that our art is actually transmitted to people, which is the sound. The sound quality is super important. So even if your notes are the right notes, which I'm sure they are, consider that your mix could be better. And there's always little things to focus on. And I think professionally is learning when to say no to things. Time management has something to do with that 2013 recital I told you about earlier. And it's super important to learn what your capacity is and know when to say no to things. And yeah, I'd say I was warned about that so many times too, but you won't really know until it bites you. So just be ready for that and learn to then go, oh, this is where my jumping off point of now needing to say no to less things, or more to things, and take time for yourself, That's probably.
Danny, what are some of the most memorable responses you've had to your work?
So a lot of the work I've been making recently is I'm creating these immersive installations for people to step inside of, and my goal is that they feel very dreamlike and very playful and sort of elicit a lot of nostalgia. no matter who the person is. So sort of like this vague nostalgia where things feel kind of alien but also familiar. So I'd say some of my favorite responses are when people want to come into spaces and touch the work or play with the work or dance under it or around it. I've had a lot of performances in spaces that I've created, and it's always a big honor when someone wants to perform within a space that I've constructed and designed and made. So I'd say probably that, just people wanting to play and sort of be very childlike and experimental within the places I construct.
Yeah, and it sounds like a great plug for collaborative arts as well, you know.
Woo!
All right, we're going to take a few minutes here to get the answers to your questions in the audience. As our lights go up, we have a mic and that we can hand around the audience.
Hi, Evan.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Dr. Rubel.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
Some of us realize that you're an exceptionally good pianist.
Oh, my God.
No matter when that recital was. But what I'm curious about is in your field, that's not your main skill that you use. And I'm just wondering, I can't imagine that most of the people out there are as good on an instrument as you are on yours. And how has that impacted what you do? Or is it just a side thing right now?
First of all, that's incredibly kind, especially coming from you. I mean, I'm flattered. I'm blushing up here. No, I mean, piano has I think it's a super great tool as a pianist, of course, as a composer, because it's so linear. You can kind of visualize everything on the orchestra so much better when you go, oh, you know, if you have that awareness of a keyboard, it really translates in a direct way. I play piano on a lot of the scores that we write, you know, that Brian writes and we work on, and so like Crazy Rich Asians, if you guys saw that, I played all the piano on that score. And so in a very utilitarian way, it's still like I'm the pianist on the team, so like it helps me there. But it's also such an inspiring tool. I mean, every piano is different, and even I was just playing this one up here earlier, and I was like, oh, I need to save $100,000 so I can buy a Steinway. But yeah, no, it's definitely, it's all connected, you know.
I have a question for Evan as well. As both a performer and a composer, how reasonable or practical is it to try to inhabit multiple music scenes, like jazz and classical music, or film scoring and concert music or theater music?
Good question. Still trying to figure that out totally myself. I think that it's balance, and you know, I am a firm believer in that if you like focus on everything, you're not focusing on anything. So this is now going to kind of backstab what I just said. As a composer, you kind of have to do a lot of gap filling. I promise you, if you know nothing about salsa music, your first project will be you having to write salsa music. So learn salsa music. There's someone in here, maybe that's for it. Yeah, I think I listen to everything. I listen to hip hop. I listen to EDM. I listen to Katy Perry. I listen to Ariana Grande. I'm not shamed. I listen to all the classical stuff, and it all, just kind of going off Dr. Rupel's thing too, it all is connected. And you know, I'll do something in a piece of music if it's supposed to be swing, and they tempt it with something that's like an upright bass, you know, kind of groove, like a boom, 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 boom. Do it in 808s, man. Like, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. There are no rules. Fusing it all together is what makes it cool and fun. So.
This is for Shannon. You mentioned that you were a vocal performance major. So how did you make that shift from performing to the more administration aspect of marketing?
I had a similar journey in that when I came to school, I didn't really want to make a living performing. I just really loved doing it. So I didn't want to write papers for 4 years. I wanted to sing. So I majored in voice, knowing that it would still be really, really helpful in my profession, and it is. I mean, it's really bizarre, actually, how I'm able to use my vocal degree in a marketing capacity. But falling into I knew I wanted to do arts admin. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew I wanted to be somebody who made the thing happen rather than be in the thing. And I did a bunch of internships, and I figured out that marketing was one of the more creative ways to do that, and I still wanted to be creative. So that's sort of how I ended up here. But I would say I didn't even really figure that out in college. In college, it was more just about loving singing and wanting opportunities to do that in a way where I didn't have to worry about that being my means of income. And then after that and in internships, that was when I started to really figure out the administrative journey.
How do you know when you've crossed the line from working hard the way you have to succeed in this into doing too much? How did you figure out those boundaries for yourselves? And are there any examples of those kinds of boundaries that you have now?
I feel properly like I could answer this question given that I'm at the office till 10 p.m. all the time. Don't do that. I think that's, when you dream about work, when you on the weekends are still answering emails, it's too far. And look, I admittedly am not good at the balance of it. I think it's something you constantly have to work at throughout your entire career. I just inherently am kind of a workaholic. I do enjoy it. So there is, I think maybe my line is further than somebody else's line because it does bring me personal fulfillment. But I think when you're starting to feel burned out and you're not as sharp as you usually are, take a break, go on a vacation, go out to dinner. The work can wait. I don't know if you guys want to answer too.
For me, just to answer part of your question, my body feels differently when I'm overworked and I'm overstressed. So just listening to my body and kind of taking self-care routines more seriously. That's like taking a nice hot bath or stepping away from the studio or the performance space or wherever and just having a cup of tea and reading a book, just taking your mind off of things. And also, if you're responding to work emails at midnight on a Saturday, that's not good. So pay attention to that.
We probably have time for one more question.
Hey, so I guess this question is more directed towards Evan and Shannon. What resources did you use to find internships, job opportunities? Was it word of mouth? Was Handshake, I hate to say it this way, but was Handshake around back then? And I don't know. This is my question.
We probably have different answers.
Yeah, so let me get this straight again. I started laughing. I was refresh me on the key point of that again. Sorry. So, internships and
back when I said getting straight out of undergrad, what resources were available, or how did y'all sort of break into those things?
Right. Well, I accompanied for my first year, and that was really awesome. Kate gave me all the experience I needed, and I could sight read my way through LA for a little bit. But I think just going out and meeting people and being genuine is probably the most helpful thing. I never got an internship or anything, but the way I landed with Brian was I had my manager and he was friends with Brian, so I just said, dude, I will clean toilets, please, and you bet you're whatever. I literally, sorry, yeah. So I literally was cleaning toilets for the first couple months there. I was getting the dry cleaning. So, just do whatever it takes to get in the room, and you guys are all wonderful, talented people. It's assumed that you know what you're doing, so add more to just your talent. Be someone that's fun to work with, that they want to see you every day, and that will get you any internship that'll lead. It's not about getting the internship, it's about meeting that person and getting that connection. And if you're yourself, you work hard, that no matter what your title is at the beginning, that's going to take you the rest of the way, I think.
My answer is different because we do different things. I think that this is actually something I didn't really get in college, was from an admin perspective, how do I get into that field? I think every job that I got, I found on playbill.com. Even in the classical industry, they have a free what's the word I'm looking for, database. And employers have to pay to post on there, but it's not like backstage.com where you have to be a member. Anybody can use Playbill. And so for me, the first internships I got, I found them all on Playbill. I told you the ridiculous story of my music video cover letter, but even that job I saw it on Playbill, and I applied for it anyway. For Harry Potter, I will say networking really does become key. I'm not somebody who's good at that kind of networking, who enjoys a cocktail party. I'm kind of actually socially like anxious about those kinds of things. So for me, the networking that ended up being really important was the day-to-day, how you work with other people and collaborate with other people. I ended up getting poached from my last job for Harry Potter because I had made such a good connection with the general manager for the show, who's a very important person in the world of a Broadway show. And she and I had worked together on some other things, and she knew I liked Harry Potter, so she reached out. So at first I think, use databases. Indeed.com is another one that a lot of people use and employers post on. But then it's about being easy to work with. You don't have to be a natural cocktail party networker to network. You can just form good relationships at work by doing good work, and again, just being a good person to work with, be happy and pleasant and willing to collaborate. And I think that a lot of opportunities come from that.
Couldn't agree more. All right, everyone. Can we give a big round of applause? So you all have had a chance now to hear from our panelists. The next half hour is for you to get to have a more personal relationship with each of these people from our first panel and from our second panel, still over here. They will be out in the lobby area. Please introduce yourselves. Make some networking opportunities. Thank you all so much. We do have a closing remark, so relax, sit down for 1 second. Just relax. Sorry, jumped ahead of ourselves.
Sorry, I'm standing between you and your networking. One quick housekeeping item. I did get a notification that someone lost their Jack card and their keys. So check your pockets. They will be in the Dean Suite to the left when you exit the auditorium. My name is Brad Miller. I am with the JMU Alumni Association, and we organize events such as Homecoming, I Heart JMU Week, and networking panels such as this evening. And we were excited to be involved in this evening's event and want to thank our partners in the Career and Academic Planning Office, as well as the College of Visual and Performing Arts for working alongside us to strengthen our students' Madison network. Your Madison network includes the people and relationships you make at JMU, both personally and professionally, and they'll be part of your life going forward. It's now time to move into the next phase of the evening, which is the networking part that will take place out in the foyer again, and that event will conclude at 6 p.m. Thank you.